ora tātou, haere mai, and welcome along to Showy Ovaries, a podcast where I, Chief Vulva Correspondent Penny Ashton, usually am placing my penetrating gaze into the world of menopause and all its manifestations. But today I'm branching out, as it were, with a deep dive down under in a Showy Ovaries special of VNN, Vulva News Network, and specifically Vulvodynia. As always, a quick reminder that I am not a doctor, and if your vulva is revolting you, irritating you, or just confusing you, please seek out a proper specialist, but don't take "oh, it's all in your head" as an answer, and keep looking till you find someone with specialist knowledge that you are looking for. Today's guests are not doctors, but my word, they are freaking vulva experts through a long and winding road of finding out just what the ever-living fuck is going on downstairs. Fellow fringe performers, they are beaming in from the Paris of the Prairies, aka Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which they actually do call it that, which is one of the last places I actually visited in the world before it turned to a COVID-y shit show, also for their Fringe Festival. First up for introductions, we have my good buddy Ingrid Garner, who hails from LA and has toured all over the world, often at the same time as me, with two shows about her grandmother, who moved from New Jersey to Berlin in 1939, age 9, called Eleanor's Story, An American Girl in Hitler's Germany, and Eleanor's Story, Life After War. Ingrid's shows have sold oodles of tickets, gathered a galaxy of starry reviews and awards. So hello to you, Ingrid.
Oh, cheers, Penny. It's so good to see you.
You too, absolutely. But now, next introduction. Also, we have this is my second threesome, so I'm getting a lot of action on this podcast. Also, we have non-binary fringe luminary Amica Hunter, who has toured fringes extensively too from their home base in Portland, Oregon, with their company A Little Bit Off. They are a physical comedy dynamo and wowed audiences with their performing partner from Wellington to Edmonton to Seattle to Perth, with award-winning shows such as Bella Culpa, Bow and Arrow, and A Grave Mistake. So hello to you, Amica.
Hello. Good to see you again.
Nice to see your faces indeed. So how is Fringe?
Different this year. A little less, but less people for sure. But the overwhelming feeling from everyone is we're just so happy to see each other again. It's almost like, yeah, we're going to lose money maybe, but it's just food for the soul.
You're going to lose money?
Maybe. Who knows? We'll see by the end.
But it's a big, happy Fringe family reunion.
It's a reunion.
Because I'm watching it from a distance and being jealous, but I wasn't ready. I'm going to Rarotonga, excitingly, tomorrow.
Oh, yay.
And it'll be my first time leaving the country. And we are all such nomads. It's been,
yeah.
I mean, I was very happy to be in New Zealand, let's be honest. But yeah, I just miss those connections. And because when I'm home, I tour a lot around New Zealand, but from my base in Auckland, I am home by myself a lot. And that's really, so I'm sitting here. So it's lovely to be able to talk to people for this podcast and stuff.
Yeah. Roaming about.
Yeah. And how are you finding it?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's very fulfilling and very exhausting. I'm incredibly dysregulated and incredibly artistically fulfilled. And it's just really nice to be around all the friends again, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And this is your last tour in the way that you usually tour? Is that right? Like
Yeah. So my performance partner, David, and I are going to be doing different things for a little while. He's back in school and I am not back in school. And so I'm toying with the idea of trying out doing a solo show. And seeing how that goes for the next couple of years. So
I think you should do that because then you get to keep all the money for yourself.
Yeah. But then I have to do all the work for myself.
You do. And that is something that Ingrid and I are very familiar with, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as soon as you introduce one other person, that bottom line is very different. So yeah.
Yes, it has been very much hard for us in that way, especially because we tend to drive and the gas prices of this year are rough, but the ticket prices have not gone up even a dime.
Have they really not?
They really have not.
See, that is so annoying to me.
$12.
See, this is my common complaint about the Canadian Fringe circuit. It's great. It's almost like sort of socialism for theatre, right? Like we don't pay much for venues. Audiences pay fuck all for shows. But, it's like, come on, New Zealand inflation just hit like 7.5%. And it's not like we don't have inflationary costs. So why the hell should they not pay a little bit extra for theatre?
Exactly. Yeah. Has
there been any sort of revolt?
No, we just make a little snarky comment here and there in our bow line.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one thing I'm not backwards at coming forwards about is complaining to management. So I would happily do that.
Well, we wish you were here.
Yeah. Yeah, people are just laying on the guilt a little bit more thick this year in their bow lines. Yeah, just a little bit.
So interesting that people that don't know what fringe touring is like, this behind the scenes sort of vernacular that we have that's for us.
Lifting the veil.
I always describe it to non-fringers as it's kind of like gambling. You pay your money up front, and then you try to make something really good, and then you scramble and hustle and scramble and hustle, and maybe you'll break even, maybe you'll make some money, maybe you'll be in the red. You just don't know.
Yeah, so you just don't know. And we have probably all done all of those things.
Yeah.
And it was such a learning curve for me to, poetry does not sell as well as Jane Austen, for example, which I've learnt from Edinburgh to Adelaide to Canada, everywhere for that. So, yeah, it's that learning curve as you go too. Yeah, I actually call often non-performing people muggles because it's sort of like quite a good description of the total difference between us. Or Cal Wilson, who is a New Zealand comedian, I interviewed her when I was in Edinburgh in 2004, and she said fringing is like being naked at a nudist colony a lot of the time, where you might stick out normally, but we're in this big group of people that are all doing this stuff together. So especially in Edinburgh is nuts. Because have you done Edinburgh, Amica?
I was there as a street show. My first time, secretly, David and I went our very first time working together, and we made a street show, and we were there, and we did it, I think, twice, and then our feelings got too hurt, and we gave up. And we just saw some great shows and explored and saw the fringe, and we're like, wow. And I haven't been back since.
Yeah, that's the best way. Oh, you haven't been back since. My first time was as a punter in 97, when you were probably not born. And I loved it. It was amazing. And then I've done it 4 times. Twice was a shit show and twice was great.
Yeah.
Spoiler, Jane Austen. Have you done it yet, Ingrid?
Yeah, I've done it 3 times.
You have done. I thought so. Were we there at the same time? I should remember that.
But no, I don't think
so.
No.
Right.
No.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like that Venn diagram of touring too, where you're not quite sure, remember where you saw people last.
Oh, yeah. I can never know who in what place, It's just like, I have this general sense.
But it's also sort of just the romanticism of it, though, is just like there's kind of no city on earth that you go where there's a fringe festival that feels like a stranger because it's all just populated by people you know.
That's so true. Yeah, and it is everywhere. But anyway, we could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but we should get to the matter, well, not at hand, sometimes at hand. So I thought I'd start off, because this is very different from my usual thing, but I'm sort of tailoring some of my questions to this situation. But I'd start off with the question I've been asking everybody, which is also could take an hour. I'll start with Ingrid, which is, what has the relationship been like with your body through your life, and what journey has it been on? If you feel comfortable telling us how old you are, I think that would be useful.
Yeah. I'm 29, 30 in September, actually. Ooh. So this condition started when I was 19 years old. And up until that point, I actually had a pretty good relationship with my body. Like I never felt a lot of body shame, I think. And my family was always very body positive and all that. But I was put on birth control pills when I was 16 years old for acne, like a lot of people are. That's usually like the reason you get put on birth control pills. And then at age 19, I developed this condition, provoked vestibulodynia. And the next 10 years leading up to this point, it was devastating. It was really, while it is a chronic pain condition, it's a physical pain condition, it is far more a psychological pain condition. It really degraded my sense of self, my sense of not just my sexuality, but my self-image. And there's a lot of societal expectations of women, and you're kind of, valued by by your sexuality and like by your ability to please men. And I just felt like I was subhuman, like not being able to perform. It's an impotence. It's a sort of impotence. And that really took a toll. And it's only just kind of now starting to come around. So,
ooh. And so for those who don't know what that condition is, can you describe it for us?
So provoked vestibulodynia, it means that the entrance of my vagina, the vestibule, experiences sensation as pain, and it feels like nerve pain, even though physically, if you look at it, there's nothing wrong. And if you went to a doctor and they do all kinds of tests, like there's nothing wrong with you, but the feeling of it feels like nerve pain. It feels like a skinned knee, like 1,000 needles, like
like lemon juice and a paper cut.
Yeah, very raw. So it's very baffling because and I had it for 2 years before I even suspected that anything was wrong with me, because you're kind of told your whole life as a femme person that sex is going to hurt and it's not for you to enjoy. Like you're not supposed to enjoy it. You're kind of weird if you are anticipating it and want it. So
because I don't think I ever felt quite like that. So where do you think that's just from society? Is that from like a religious upbringing or how does that get in?
I didn't have a religious upbringing or anything, but I think there's just always been, like a societal crypticness around female sexuality and it's just in media too. Like the joke in every sitcom is that men always want sex and women never want sex. Yeah. So you're kind of just indoctrinated with that shame around it. Yeah, that's my impression.
And for me, because I was, quote unquote, a bit of a slut. So then that got into my head, right? Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm a slut, and then the amount of slut shaming I got in comedy, even though I talked about sex a lot, like in my poetry and stand up and stuff, and then I'd get introduced as this next woman bathes in cum is what one person said when they introduced me on stage, which was the highlight. So it's sort of different that way. And but then of course I didn't have this condition. So just sex was just too painful.
Yeah. But I did it. I guess that's another thing that I have a lot of shame about is that I still wanted it. It didn't take away my desire for sex. It just made it painful. And I always kind of described it as, do you know the movie A Clockwork Orange? Or the book.
I haven't actually seen it. Well, just with the eyes.
Yeah. That moment in the book and the movie is that this character his favorite thing is committing ultraviolence. And so the government like takes him and basically brainwashes him to experience extreme pain whenever he hears or sees the thing that he loves most, which is Beethoven and ultraviolence. So they, kind of condition him to experience pain at the thing that he loves most. And while that's, a horrible thing, he was doing horrible things. Like for me, that is kind of how I felt. Like I felt like I was being tortured by just being conditioned to experience pain whenever I was hoping for pleasure. And it's a real mind fuck. Like it feels like there's a shot collar in your vagina.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible.
And what were your partners like around this?
During the time I was developing this condition, I had a pretty terrible partner who the first 6 months of our relationship, so during the time that this condition was developing, there was a lot of sexual abuse going on. And while that is not, I know now that's not the cause of the pain was caused by birth control pills, which I'll get into later, but it's very tied up. The pain from the condition is very tied up in the emotional pain from that trauma. And I didn't see it as abuse at the time, but I do remember a couple years into the relationship, I brought up that I was experiencing pain. I was like brave enough to finally say, I just said, it just hurts at the beginning. Like when I'm first being entered, it hurts. And he just gave a big sign. He's like, well, how do you think that makes me feel? I was like, oh, well, no.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about that again.
Wow, that's how does that make me feel? And you're like, not as painful as me putting needles in your dick.
Yeah. Well, and that was just like it was just very heartbreaking. And then to go to doctors after that point, and doctors can be incredibly callous about it because they don't know what you have. Even OBGYNs have often never heard of this condition. Yeah. I've had doctors say, like, I will try to explain what I have to them, and I had a doctor say, oh my God, how are you going to have sex with your husband? Are you going to jump when I put my fingers inside you? Like, oh my slide God. Down, you goof. So wow. Yeah. And I've heard much worse from other people, but yeah, that's a very common experience.
I'll stop you there because we'll do this in chunks so that Amica's not just sitting there for ages. So, but that's, and I had a gynecologist recently when I said that, because I was talking about Ovestin cream, and I was saying that I had tried it internally and then I had tried it externally because I had read about doing that in a menopause book. And he said, no, we don't do that. And I said, I read a menopause doctor. No, I said, I read about a specialist doctor that does that. And he said, who? Dr. Google? Like
wow.
That. Yeah. And I went, no. And I like, because I'm like, fuck you, dude. And then got really snappy with him. And that was before he, did the internal exam. And then you're like, ugh, I have to show this fuckwit my fanny. And I just don't want to. Anyway, over to you. Now, is that friend?
It is. It's Latin for friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom found it in a baby name book. And it's kind of ironic because I'm a bit of a misanthrope, So I'm like.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Good. Okay. So what's your relationship with your body been like?
Well, man, what a question.
It is a big question.
As far as I'll just go off of Ingrid as far as this condition, which I also, received the message that oh, sex hurts your first time, right? And so, I have what we would call primary provoked vulvodynia or vestibulodynia. That means primary, meaning it was always there, probably since around puberty, and provoked meaning like when touched is when it hurts. So, I can remember feeling like tampons were really difficult and painful to insert. And I was like, how does anybody do this? It's pretty uncomfortable, but I guess that's just part of it because it's all swirled into the messaging of like, periods, it's gross and uncomfortable, So I'm like, oh, all right, this is part
being
of
a woman is pain.
Sure,
absolutely.
exactly.
That's what we get.
Yeah. And then, as far as having sex for the first time, I had a partner that was very patient, but it took a long time of trying and it being so uncomfortable. And I was just thinking the whole time, oh, it's because it's my first time and it's supposed to hurt your first time, And then eventually 6 times in, I'm like, well, maybe it's still just because I'm so new to this. It still just hasn't stopped hurting yet. And kind of like you, Ingrid, I did a lot of, I feel like I have some trauma from engaging in experiences that were very, very painful for me and not knowing how to stop people or having bad experiences when I would stop people. And I kind of learned that usually it's a worse outcome if you tell someone, we have to stop, this is hurting me too much. And so I would kind of just like grit my teeth and wait for it to be over, which is really sad to me.
Oh, yeah, totally.
A lot of my like super young adult sexual experiences were some version of that. And sometimes it wouldn't hurt very much, or occasionally it wouldn't hurt at all, which was like these magic moments where I was like, wow, what's the difference here? But it was kind of fluctuating for me. And I always felt like it was like 2 sliders on a board, right? Where it's like, there's the pain and the pleasure. And I'm always having to be hyper vigilant and keep my awareness on which one is overtaking and if it's worth it and if I need to call it or not, or if I can sit through it. And that's just not the kind of experiences I wanted to be having.
No. And do you know what's funny for me? When I first started having sex, like I had sex with a lot of people before I had sex with anyone twice.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I talked about this recently on a podcast to one partner. I was like, oh, if you want to have sex, it's fine, but it doesn't do anything for me, which must have been deeply sexy. But basically I'll lie there and think of Wellington and you have a good time.
Yeah.
But then he was determined to, stimulate other parts of you during sex, which suddenly was like, wow. So that's,
amazing.
I had a dispassionate disinterest, but to actually have to negotiate the pain. So did you talk about things like, let's try oral sex instead, or was that bad
Well,
too?
that wasn't so great either because it's just so sensitive. And like if it's somebody with a beard or like a stubble, it's like, I'm going to die. So I kind of would just not, I don't know. It was difficult for me. And kind of the most difficult moments would be actually hanging out with other young female bodied friends who are all having their sexual awakenings and talking about how much fun they're having. And me feeling like I had to laugh along as if I was also having fun. And then I would just leave and go cry alone and be like, I'm broken. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So you didn't feel able to talk to people about it?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because I really thought it's me and my fault and my problem. Something's wrong with me. I don't know. It didn't seem like I could talk about it. And anytime I went to the doctor and worked up all my nerve to bring it up, they would say, you need to use more lubricant or it sounds like a yeast infection. Which it wasn't, or
it's always their first go-to. It's like, same with me. They're like, here's some diflucan, and you're like, all right, okay, I'm pretty sure it's not that.
Yeah. They really act like that's the only thing that ever goes wrong. They're just like, it's a yeast infection. It's like, okay, I know the difference. So I was just like dismissed constantly. And then I stopped asking and I was like, well, the medical experts are telling me there's nothing wrong with me. It's in my head. So I'm just broken and unlovable, And
how old are you now? Sorry, Amica?
I'm 30. Yeah.
You are 30, right? Okay. Do you think, now this is some COD psychology at play because you have come out as non-binary now.
Yeah.
Do you think that has contributed, like, this supposedly quintessential female thing that you haven't, is it, or am I just totally making sure?
No, it's funny you asked that because I think a big like aha moment for me gender wise was actually, I kind of almost think that I would have figured it out sooner without this because I realized that the only thing that made me feel like, oh, I'm a woman, I know what that means, is just having a shared experience of pain and trauma, which is very sad. But I was like, oh, of course I'm a woman because we all know what it's like to be harassed and you know, we all have had an experience of like sexual abuse. So like, yeah, of course, we're all in the same club.
Fuck,
and then when
sad,
I realized
like
that was the only glue like binding me to that identity, I was like, oh, that's pretty gross. You know, if that's like the only thing that I naturally identify with and all the rest of it, I'm like, that doesn't fit me. I was like, interesting. I think I can let go of that. I think I can let go of that. Yeah.
Wow. Right. And so up until this point, do you think you had a relatively normal relationship with your body, whatever that is?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. Normal in that way where you're like, am I pretty enough? Am I whatever enough? And then some of my feelings about my body are tied into also just having chronic pain and chronic fatigue in general. And so my journey of figuring that diagnosis out as well. And now I kind of tie those together because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I was like, I really wonder what the crossover is between that and this condition, the vulva condition. So yeah, so I kind of have a contentious relationship with my body where it's less about image and more about function. And I have a lot of sadness and disappointment of that my energy level can't be where I want it to be, or that I'm easily injured, you know, or experiencing a lot of pain. But I'm also quite grateful to my body, you know, because it's adapting and doing what it's got to do.
And you're such a physical performer, which is interesting.
It is, yeah. My doctor actually has a theory. She said that she thinks I started doing physical stuff as a sort of self-medication almost, because the more you're moving physically with a thing like fibromyalgia, the easier it can be to kind of cope with that. So,
and for those who don't know, can you describe what fibrom I can't even say it.
Yeah.
It actually is?
Yeah, so I guess the easiest way to describe it, it's like a neurological condition where basically your pain sensations, like the interpretation of your nerves is kind of cranked up. So your pain dial is cranked in your brain in a way that you can't, unfortunately, fiddle with very well.
Can't medicate at all.
Yeah, so it's not like a degenerative thing, but it is, you experience things like that maybe other people would be able to tune out. It's like that background noise of tension or pain or whatever it is. And then there's some strange symptoms. Like sometimes I'll get like a bunch of my area of my skin will be so sensitive that it feels like a sunburn or like a fever or something, you know, where like the air touching it hurts, and that's weird. And then it goes away, and just all kinds of weird little things.
Wowzers. I mean, and it's so interesting too, isn't it? Sometimes I think when I saw somebody saying we judge ourselves on our internal monologue, but we judge other people on what they present to the world. So we look at people walking around thinking everybody's healthy, what's wrong with me? But so many of us have chronic conditions, and I've got so many: epilepsy, asthma, I've got diverticulosis, I've got thrombocytopenia, and now this. It's like, fuck, I'm starting to sound like a Latin textbook. And, you know, for a long time I was like, oh, you know, but just these last couple, you just start to go, oh my God, like what the fuck is next? So yeah, for me, I think I kind of erred on the side of like, well, surely everybody feels this way. But I would still be hard on myself and be like, well, everybody feels this tired and this much pain all the time. So why can't I keep up, and why can't I put on a good face like everybody else? But then I remember, you know, when you go to the doctor and they say, any pain today? And I would always kind of look at them with this face like, okay, I see what we're both doing here. And I jokingly say like, no, you know? Oh, wow.
But
you thought it was like an internal joke, but they were genuinely asking a question.
Yeah, I was like, this is a silly joke question that they have to ask, even though we all know that everybody's in at least a 4 out of 10 pain every day. And then I told that to my doctor, and I was like, it's so funny how, like, you know, I know what they mean. They mean any new or different pain. And she's like, no, they mean any pain. And I was like, what?
Oh, wow. That is crazy. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's so funny too, because I've never, like, when I think of you, I think of energy. So
yeah, interesting, right? Yeah. I put on a bright face, and then I go home and sleep for 12 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting. The amitriptyline is making me sleep more than I would like. So, you know, even though I've had some sort of insomnia moments which drove me crazy, especially when my brain will not stop. But yeah, like it takes me about half an hour to wake up properly now, and I actually hate that. I used to be bing and awake and stuff and get on with the day. So this is the other thing, that the drugs can fuck with you as well. But right. Okay, well, thank you for sharing those. So now, Ingrid, tell us about your medical journey. So doctors and things.
Well, I just wanted to say one more thing on the body issue, because this Amica speaking about their experience really brought this up. But like a big part of having this condition is just like you just desire to be normal so much that you will subject your body to things that hurt it. And And I feel a lot of guilt and shame for doing that to my body. In some ways, I feel like I'm my sexual abuser because it's like my body is a different thing from me. And I really resent it. I really resent its impotency. I really resent its not being able to keep up with what I want, and what I want to do. And so in the past, I have really forced my body to do things that hurt it. And I worry, I always worry that hurt me, like that I made my condition worse just because I wanted it, I wanted it to be different.
Yeah. And this is my overriding thing is like, no matter how many times someone like me goes, it's so not your fault, let that go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you'll be like, oh, sure. Okay. Now it's cured, but it's not. But it's like, oh God, it's so not your fault. So I just want to expunge your shame. I shall get a shame sponge. I fucking need that for this podcast. A shame sponge that I put across the internet to Saskatoon. Yeah. But so what was your doctor doing?
So I was very fortunate because most people would not feel comfortable bringing up this issue with a family member, like their mother. I'm very privileged that my mother worked in women's health, so I felt comfortable enough to even mention something like this to her. I think most people would feel so ashamed of doing that.
See, that's weird to me. Like, I feel like mothers are the first port of call. So again,
I don't know. It's just there's a crypticness in our family, I think, about sexuality. But anyway, I brought it up with her that I was experiencing pain during sex, and I just remember her gripping the steering wheel and just going, oh no, you need to talk to your sister. My sister had been suffering with it for 10 years before me. So in a way that was fortunate because she was able to tell me what I had. If you kind of research a little bit about it, people do talk about it. And it's a very specific set of symptoms. It's a very, everyone kind of experiences this particular condition the same way. It's that stinging, burning, raw feeling just at the entrance of the vagina, and it just hurts at the entrance. Internal pain, not so much. It's very specific in that clock around the vestibule. So I was fortunate that I knew what I had, but yeah, again, no doctor had ever heard of it. And so you just kind of have to go off the National Vulvodynia Association's website of recommendations for treatments. And one of the main ones is you just ask for lidocaine, and most doctors will give that to you, like a 5% lidocaine, which is it's the numbing agent that dentists use.
It doesn't last very long though, does it?
No. And something that Amica and I have recently figured out is it really hurts for me when
it wears off. It burns.
Yeah, it burns when you put it on. It burns extreme. And I just realized recently, I'm like, oh my God, it always smelled like peppermint to me. And I realized, oh yeah, they were literally prescribing us the dentist version, which has peppermint extract in it, which is really bad to put on raw nerve pain.
Yeah.
But they never thought about that. Yeah, they're just like, okay, you want lidocaine? Okay, here. So anyway, that,
Jesus Christ.
which is kind of awful because even for your partners, it's like, okay, hold on. I just have to numb myself from about what's about to happen, which really hurts their feelings.
Wow. So that was specifically for sex?
Yeah. That was one of the first things. And then my sister's doctor had prescribed to her something that she thought was working, which was gabapentin lidocaine compound, which is supposed to help with pain. But just kind of throughout my journey, there's been so many times I'm like, I just heard about this new treatment. I'm so excited to try it. And then I'll get put on it. And I think I'm like, oh my God, I think it's working. And then a couple months in, I guess it's not really working. There's so much placebo. And also they'll always tell you well, you got to try it for 6 months to a year to see if it actually works. It's just so much wasted time.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it because you're in the States, is it really expensive?
Some of the stuff is, $75 a month. And sometimes you want to try more than one thing, not to mention mental health therapy. That is a cost all of it its own. That can be $150 to $200 a month. And so finally, I met someone who was a patient of Dr. Erwin Goldstein, who is the premier doctor in the world on this condition. And I'd heard about him for years. He kind of wrote the major text about this condition, which is called Why Sex Hurts. Him and another doctor named Dr. Andrew Goldstein in New York. But I'd always avoided going to him because it is it's expensive. It's very expensive because he doesn't take insurance, which I think is actually to make it more accessible, because in the States, your insurance won't cover you going to certain doctors. So if you have to go through insurance, they won't cover it.
Fucking hell. So how much was it?
$1,400. It's a 4-hour visit.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Okay. I just think imagine not only people now who can't afford this, but centuries past, what women's suffered through with, you not even being able to talk about it in the Victorian era and people putting fucking leeches on labias to solve menopause. I keep coming back to that one. I can't believe that. Just all that sort of shit.
One of the early treatments, which is not that long ago, for this condition was capsicum extract, meaning chili pepper extract, which is the main ingredient in pepper spray. They would have you put it on and leave it on as long as you could handle it in an effort to burn off your nerves.
To burn the nerve endings dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck me. I'm just like, oh my God, that's so horrendous. I can hear jaws dropping through the internet. Right. Wow. So how was Dr. Goldstein?
Yeah, Dr. Goldstein is such a character. The way that the office visit looked, it's a 4-hour visit, and that's part of why it's so expensive, because it's very thorough, and it's not intended to be something that you go back like a lot throughout the year. This is supposed to be kind of a holistic visit. So there's a therapy session. So you kind of go and talk to a therapist, which a lot of people with this condition may never have spoken to a mental health professional. And so have never had a chance to kind of process and just speak about their experience with anyone. So I thought that was great. But I had, sought mental health before. So I was clear. I expressed to her that my biggest fear was that today's appointment will end with them saying there's nothing they can do for me and they can't prescribe me anything new, and that it'll just be the same, medications that I've been prescribed before, and that it's in my head, that I just need more therapy. And she assured me, no, you are going to come out with like a new treatment plan. So then I spoke to Dr. Goldstein, and he is like very funny and eccentric and kind of like a school teacher. Like we went into his office and he threw his book at me, Why Sex Hurts, and he's like, catch. And he's like, now open up to this page. And he said, read that portion of the page. And it said, hormonally mediated provoked vestibulodynia. And he's like, read the symptoms, like read the cause. And I like read it out. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I have. And it was basically like, was put on birth control pills, was, just like basically like the exact series of events that led up to my condition. So it's called hormonally mediated. So I always knew that birth control pills were the cause of it, but I never understood why. Okay. And no one was ever able to explain to me, like, how does that work? What about birth control pills causes this? And so he explained it to me, which is that the birth control pills of like my mother's generation were much higher in natural estrogen. New birth control pills, they call it like low dose birth control pills. And they're like, it's supposed to be more appealing because it's like less hormones. But to make up for the lack of natural estrogen, there's a high level of synthetic estrogen. And that synthetic estrogen sends a message to your liver, if you're predispositioned to this like me, to stop producing as much testosterone and start producing a protein called sex hormone binding globules, which attach to the testosterone that you do have and render it inactive. So essentially you're suffering from a severe lack of testosterone. And what a lack of testosterone can cause is lack of libido, lack of lubrication. With that, there can be a lot of irritation because if you're not being lubricated, bacteria is getting trapped in those glands. It can cause a lot of irritation. And so it was the way he explained it, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. It was just totally mind blowing. It just explained everything, and like lack of energy, lack of a lot of stuff. So he explained to me that they've still have not gotten testosterone medications approved for women. There's 40 for men. There's 40 for men and 0 for women. Yeah. So he had to prescribe me off-label testosterone for males. And I just take a 14th of the dose. A 14th. Yeah. One tube's supposed to, like, for a man would go on just like a whole tube every day. But at least the good thing about that is I get like a month's supply for a man's, and it lasts me a year. I've not been on it for a terribly long time, but for in the first 5 weeks, it was like such a difference. My pain went from a 6 to a 4, wow, which is significant in a 5-week period. And my testosterone level shot up from a 7 to 110 in a 5-week period, which is a lot. It was a little bit more. So they had me scale back from a 10th of a dose to 14th. But yeah, libido went up, lubrication went up, energy went up. I'm going through my second puberty right now. There's only one thing on my mind. I'm man-spreading all over the place. I'm like explaining intricate concepts to little ladies. So Yeah, it's been really interesting. And then the other thing that I was prescribed is a testosterone estradiol compound that I also put on topically at night. And that's just supposed to help kind of more locally to the area. It doesn't get systemically absorbed like the testosterone does. And the testosterone's applied topically, like on the back of my leg, because you do get hair growth and you do get, they told me I might experience aggression.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
I've never seen aggressive Ingrid before.
Oh no, I was worried because I just I've been a civil servant during the pandemic, and I was working the election, and the elections in America are getting very contentious sometimes for poll workers. And I was worried I wouldn't be able to keep my incredibly patient nature, but I still did, even though it was a little bit harder.
Right. Did you just break down into tears and sob in his office?
No, but I suspect that happens a lot. And I think that's why they make you go to the therapist first, because his time is better spent actually helping people and not taking on a lot of people's trauma. But I understand it. And he kept it really light. So he spent that part of his hour explaining the condition to me. And then they went and there was a physical exam done on me that was done by a female doctor. And they had me on a big screen. So I was just seeing my vagina really big. And she was going through, and it was very interesting because she was explaining so this is what we would typically see, if you were at normal testosterone levels. Yeah, this is kind of a symptom. If you have kind of a small clitoris, can sometimes be an indication of low testosterone. And if, it would be about this size if it were healthy, and just a lot of kind of weird little things. And then they sent me on my way with the medication. But it was a very draining day because it was just so much information. And I think the most emotional part was just hearing that it could be so simple, that it could be such a simple cure, and no doctor. And I've participated in studies for medications to help this condition and never worked. At UCLA, I've participated in 2 different studies, and no doctor has ever been like, yeah, have you ever gotten a hormone panel done? It could be so simple. And I'm still not there. Fuck. I'm still not all the way. And unfortunately I'm on tour right now, but when I get back, I'll give them a call, and because the pain's kind of stagnated a little bit. It's at a 3.5 right now. And I'd love for it to be less, but it's certainly tolerable. It's better. How Amica was describing, you're kind of always measuring your pain level versus your pleasure level. And is it worth it? It's worth it right now. It's just so painful to have known remember a time when sex didn't hurt. And I only got to experience that for a year before developing this condition.
Oh, see, and I never have had that, except for a few rare magical times. It just was always like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, that's a journey, all right, isn't it? And it's taken 10 years for you.
10.
And yeah, wow. I know I'm in my eighth month, but, and I love that I don't love, it's kind of fascinating, but shit, that you're so in tune with your body that you can do your pain levels to decimal places, 3.5.
Well, it's arbitrary, but it's just something to help you kind of, all right, I'm tracking.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Because I would say that I'm at a 2 or, so it's really not there. And with diverticulosis, you get sort of bowel pain and stuff. And then I just put up with that at times, but that's generally been lower and stuff as well. Right. Well, thank you for that. What? And Amica, you were sitting there listening, just like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh,
yeah. No, but I could see that you were I was going, what? And you're like, yeah, I've heard it all before. So, right. Okay. So tell us about your journey.
So I had a partner that kind of figured out for me what the condition was.
Amazing.
Which I have mixed feelings about, honestly, because I was grateful, and that was a very supportive move. But some part of me was really bummed out to once again have a man tell me what my body was doing, and I was like, cool, and some part of me was ashamed that, I think I was 20, probably 20 or 21 at the time. And I was like, oh, great. Somebody else has figured this out, and all I've done is cried in the shower and asked a few doctors and then stopped asking the doctors.
Oh, so I'm sending my shame sponge to you now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so then I kind of had an answer as to what the condition was. But again, the solutions were not great. I also experimented with the lidocaine, but I had a big hurdle to overcome in order to even try it. I didn't even want to try it for a while because the idea that I would have to numb myself for having sex with a man, I was like, fuck that. That. I'm not going to, sorry, I don't know if I can curse on here, but.
Have you heard me? Hello? Yeah.
I'm not going to fucking do that. Yeah. So I was like, hell no. But then, eventually I did try it, mixed but not very great results. And I found out that in Portland, there was a specialty clinic for this condition, which is rare. There's only a few in the whole country where they're specializing in this kind of pain. And I was very excited until I called to try to make an appointment. And I'm on the cheap state insurance. And they said, oh, we don't take that insurance. And I was like, okay, can I pay out of pocket? No, we don't do that.
What?
So basically they were like, you're too poor. You can't come. I was allowed to, under my insurance, I was allowed to see a regular gynecologist, but I could not see this specialist. And a few years, I would call every couple months and get the same answer, that they couldn't take my insurance, and they also would refuse for me to pay out of pocket.
What? Why? What's the justification for that?
They just didn't do that at the time. They don't do.
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, this is insane. And so what I did is I found some studies that this doctor was doing. Her name is Dr. LeClaire, Catherine LeClaire. She's both the primary researcher and the main doctor, and sometimes the surgeon for this clinic. And I found some, oh God, I can't believe I did this, but there was a study, a biopsy study, where you would go in and they paid, I think, $200, and they would take a biopsy of that area of your vulva. And I was like, ooh, that's going to really suck. But I was like, you know what? Why not? But then when I got there, I found out they take one biopsy of the area that's painful and then one biopsy of a spot that doesn't hurt. And I was like, no, don't take my good skin. I don't have very much of it, So I did the 2 biopsies just so that I could be on the inside of that clinic and be like, listen, basically grabbing the researcher by their lapels and be like, you gotta help me. I've got to see Dr. LeClaire, And then I did another study where it was talk therapy support group type thing. I think we were on the education side, and we were pitted against some other mode of, and this is just therapies, I guess. But I met a lot of other people with the condition, which was very eye-opening. One thought I had, which was very simple, and it just goes to show how isolating it can be, is I was like, wow, they all look like normal people. I was like, oh, wow.
What do you think you look like?
Exactly. That's what I mean. I was just like, oh, yeah, anybody can just have this. Mm-hmm. And I kind of started to feel very lucky, because a lot of people in that group were in a very conservative Christian marriage that was common. And a lot of them had these horrible stories of, their mother-in-law calling to harass them on the phone about why they weren't having sex with her son, and it's like, oh my God, or people saying, oh, I wish my husband would still hug me and hold my hand, but since I can't have sex, he won't even look at me.
Oh, Jesus.
And I was like,
that's very common.
Oh God, that's so awful. And like, you're supposed to numb yourself so you can be a portal for their pleasure while you're suffering.
Right. Yes. That. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, eventually, by way of these studies, I was able to talk to Dr. LeClaire directly, and she was amazing. And she gave me this loophole where she supervised, I think, some of the regular gynecology doctors on a certain day of the week. So I would make an appointment on a certain day of the week and be seen by the regular doctor, and then she'd come in and have a chat with me.
Wow. What a ridiculously convoluted situation.
I know. I mean, that's America for you.
Yeah.
But she changed my life. And I did break down and bawl in her office, just to have somebody taking you seriously and being like, yeah, oh my God, that's a real thing. And I believe you. And that's really hard. And you don't deserve that. And it's not supposed to hurt you. And it's like,
Yeah, I'm like tearing up thinking about that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And she performed they call it the Q-tip test, which basically is they wet a Q-tip and they just very lightly touch it to that area of your skin. And if you go, that stings, they're like, yeah, yep, that's the condition, because that shouldn't be painful. Yeah. But so from meeting her, she kind of, I don't want to say talk to me into, but she told me about the surgery that she performs, which is a vestibulodynia, meaning they cut out that area of the vestibule. So it's basically like a thin superficial layer of skin in that entrance to the vagina. And then they remove that and advance the vaginal canal and sew it back to the outside.
Right. So you're pulling your vagina slightly out.
Yeah. Or like taking out the front stoop area and then just like cinching it in.
The stoop where the penis sits on summer afternoon.
Where it sits and takes off its shoes before entering.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I did a lot of research, and that was the first time that I started talking to my family about it, not in a big way, but just in a way of like, hey, I have this and I always have, and I need it to stop, and I'm going to have this surgery. And so I got my dad to help me research the surgery a little bit, because he's very good at finding the studies and doing the statistics and deciding if things are worth it or not. But of course, we're not going to talk about the details or what it means or the fact that I have a vagina. We're not going to talk about that, but just, just the facts.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And then I think I was, how old is it when you get kicked off your parents' insurance? Is it 26?
26.
Yeah. So I must have been 25 then, because I was just barely eligible to get on my mom's insurance through her work. So I got on her insurance because, of course, the clinic wouldn't see me with my poor person insurance. So I got on her insurance, and then I was like, all right, well, I got to get this done within the year. And then after that, there's no more seeing this doctor, Oh, and so I got on her insurance, and everything that I researched about the study basically said there is typically a significant amount of improvement in the pain, not always a complete removal of all pain, but pretty much no instances of things getting worse. So the worst outcome would be it not changing much, which would be terrible. But also I kind of hit a wall where I was like, I just got to do everything I can, and so
take this out, get rid of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was terrified, I had my wisdom teeth out, but I hadn't had full surgery, and it's in an area that is already quite traumatized. And so
absolutely. Yeah.
But I felt very comfortable because it was Dr. LeClaire actually doing the surgery as well. And so I was like, oh, good. I know her. I trust her. She's done them before. And I went under, had the surgery, successful. I was healing up, but about 2 weeks later, I had like a surprise bleeding thing happening. And rest assured, this is not common. So when I tell this story, I want to put the caveat that like I had some freak scenarios that almost never happen. And everybody kept telling me, we've never seen this before, which, doctors love to say in an excited way, but you're like, that's not helpful to me.
Yeah, really. Yeah. I am not Grey's Anatomy. Yeah.
Exactly. And basically what had happened, we found out later, is that there was like maybe an artery nicked during the initial surgery, but because of the swelling, it had been not able to release blood. But then once the swelling went down, it started just fire hosing around in there. But it was terrifying. And that's when that's about when I started writing that zine, because I wrote a zine about this whole experience, because I was high on painkillers and like bleeding copious amounts. But an arterial bleed is a weird sensation, because I would feel this tapping feeling, which I now know is my pulse. I'd feel this tapping from the inside, and I'd be like, it's coming. And then it would burst and like blood would flood
Far out.
It was crazy.
Did you just have to have like nappies or diapers? Did you?
Diapers.
Do you like my American accent? It's really good. Diapers.
Nappies.
Now do your New Zealand one. Yeah.
Well, I had my nappies. No, I can't do it. I can't do it at all.
That wasn't bad, actually. That wasn't bad.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
I used six. I used six of them.
Six of them.
Six.
Nippies. 6 or 6. Right.
6 nippies.
I used washcloths, actually. I would fold up a washcloth.
Oh, don't do these.
Well, I shouldn't do that, because I called the helpline, the nurse helpline, and she was like, well, if you're bleeding through a pad within an hour, you need to go in for an emergency blood transfusion. But if you're not, you can just hang out. And I was like, okay, so I'm saturating an entire washcloth like in 30 minutes. And she's like, I don't know. I can't really picture how much that is. Just try bleeding on some maxi pads. I was like, I don't have any maxi pads, but I'm bleeding a lot into this washcloth. And then I just remember like I was Googling how much liquid is in a washcloth, because she couldn't picture. I was trying to describe what a washcloth was to this person. And but I didn't want to go to the ER, because I didn't trust just regular people to get all up in there in my freshly surgered hole. So I waited until the morning to go back to see Dr. LeClaire, because for her office hours, because I was like, I'm not just going to go to some random in the ER. And because I wasn't thinking well, I was just like, David was taking care of me at the time. And I was like, just buy me some Gatorade and some iron supplements. I'll make it back. All the blood I'm losing, I'll just make more. Because in my mind, I was like, that's all you need to make blood. Electrolytes and iron. So I lost a lot of blood, but I still made it in the next day. And then I had to have a second surgery to figure out what the heck was going on. That was successful. They sewed that artery back up. I was back on the mend. I'm sorry this story is so long. We can abbreviate it, but
no, do not apologize for your story.
Okay, thank you. Sponge of shame. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fine.
So then it was about maybe 6 months later, and everything was healed up. The surgery site looked like normal. The stitches were out. You couldn't even tell anything had happened. I was like, amazing. All right. And I had a situation where there was someone I was making out with, and it was going really well. But then I started to feel this weird little pain. But we still had our clothes on. No one was touching anything. And I was like, what is this about? And I looked, and I saw a little bit of blood. And I was like, oh no. And I spiraled out. And I just thought, this is endless. I'm never going to be out of this, this pit of despair. But ended up what was happening is that during the surgery, somehow my Bartholin gland ducts had been covered. This is very nitpicky anatomical stuff. But I didn't know before this that the glands that make the lubrication are they spit out into the opening of the vagina. They're not high up. So the lube is not raining down from above in the vagina. It's coming
from inside the house.
It's coming from inside the house. Exactly.
The cum is coming from inside the house.
Yes, exactly.
It's like home ownership. You're that's what I've discovered, that home ownership, which we're very fortunate to have, is mainly what is that fluid and where is it coming from?
Oh no. Yes.
It's like being a woman. Yeah.
Honestly, it did kind of feel like that. I was like, what now?
Yeah.
And so I had started to get these Bartholin gland cysts, and I called it the summer of puritanical hell boils. Because basically, anytime I would get turned on, my body would create lubricant, copious amounts of lubricant, but on one side it couldn't come out because it had healed over that exit hole. So the lube was just in a terrible little blister.
They just did a touch of Marcel Marceau there for our...
I did a little mime wall. I was pretending to be the lube in the skin.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
You're very good physical performance.
Oh, thanks.
So then did they open you up again?
Yes.
Oh my word.
I spent a summer of trying to lance the lube bubble and keep it open, but the vagina heals. I mean, to its credit, it heals very quickly and very smoothly. So unfortunately, it just kept healing over. And I was like, no, you need to heal open. And it wouldn't heal open.
And so you're trying to poke this with a kebab skewer? What are you doing?
You would say a kebab skewer. No, but close. Yeah, close. Basically, I would just a safety pin or something.
Oh
my God.
Yeah, it was not fun.
American healthcare.
Honestly.
That's a fucking, trying to keep your glands open with, I hope you boiled I put it through a lighter. I made it really, I burned it.
Amica, the viewers.
Yeah, wow.
Well, I'll just say it was not fun. And I really felt despair because I was like, now I've gone even further. Now I can't even get turned on in the mind or I'm punished.
Yeah.
Let alone being touched. I was like, this is worse.
See, it's psychological torture.
Yeah, it really kind of was. And I had been feeling so hopeful, and then I was so sad again. But I went back to Dr. LeClaire, and she was like, we're going to figure this out. I've never done this before, but I just remember her saying, we're going to do a little surgery. I'm going to marsupialize it, which means kind of turn it inside out. And then I'm going to stitch a Mercedes logo, 3 little stitches. I was like, all right, the Mercedes, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And
pimp my ride.
Exactly. And by then we had some rapport. So this is what I'm most proud of, is going in for that third surgery. The first one I was terrified because it was the first time. Second one I was terrified because I was bleeding to death. Third one I was like, hey everybody, I'm back. I'm a rock star. Let's do this. And I wrote an inspirational quote on my inner thigh and drew a pair of scissors with an arrow, cut here, as a fun surprise for them. Because I'd be knocked out, and I knew that when I got on the operating table and they put my feet in the footrests, they'd see it and be like, ah. So sure enough, they got a kick out of that. And then I healed up just fine. And when I came back for my follow-up appointment to just double make sure everything was fine, I had made a little vagina dentata insert, a little fake prosthetic of scary teeth. Yeah, of teeth. And I was like, Dr. LeClaire is going to think this is so funny. And I felt so clever. And I was like, hee. So, they told me change into the gown, and we'll leave the room and come back. And I slipped it up in there and it was uncomfortable, and I was just like, haha, I'm so funny. And Dr. Claire comes back in, but with like an intern. And I was like, oh no. And she's like, oh, this person's shadowing me today. Is that okay? And I was like, yes, but, and I didn't know. And then I started to panic and I was like, maybe this is like really breaking a bunch of, doctor-patient rules. And I just started to get worried that I had gone too far. And so I was telling her like, okay, you just need to know that I have a surprise for you. Which is actually creepier and more ominous,
It's so worrisome.
Yeah. And I was like, and then I said to the intern, what you're going to see is not normal, but it won't happen again. And the rest of your patients will not be like this. So don't quit just because of me. And they're like, what? What's happening? And then sure enough, she lifted up the drape and just laughed a lot. She loved it.
Good.
Which I was like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And drum roll, what's the result?
The result is interesting. Mostly my pain is a lot better. That one area where I had to have the Bartholin's gland all messed with again is uncomfortable. But I think it might just be like scar tissue. So now instead of like the full clock face being painful, it's just like that one spot, right? Like a 7 o'clock spot. So to me,
fucking 7 o'clock.
That's a pretty great outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had to do some physical therapy after that. I had to use a dilator set to kind of get the musculature to relax, because turns out when you're in pain all the time, your muscles tense up. And honestly, for folks like me and Ingrid, we should not be doing Kegels. We should be doing the reverse of that. Yeah. Valsalva, pushing down, because our muscles are too tight from just being afraid of pain and clenching up. Right. So
yeah, which is interesting because mine's unprovoked vulvodynia. So touching in any place doesn't make any difference, like bike riding, none of that matters. And when I had a physical exam with the doctor that I've just seen, she was like, you have a very chilled out pelvic floor. And I was like, yeah, just so that difference you can imagine. I was like, she must be used to seeing people with your sort of condition where it's just like she touches you and they go through the roof. Yeah. So for me, it's like completely, it's
your
so interesting.
It's like vibing.
Totally, man. I've got a very chilled pelvic floor. Yeah. Absolutely. So I was like, interesting. But right. Okay. Yeah. Well, fuck. Well done.
Thanks. Yeah.
How old were you when you first had sex?
15. And I also was put on birth control at 15 as well.
Right. Okay.
Well, and so sorry to add on more things, but the interesting thing is that I have also taken testosterone for gender reasons, not for sexual dysfunction reasons. And it would be so interesting to see if that would have affected it. But because I've had that skin removed and I've only taken testosterone after the surgery, I haven't noticed a difference in that regard.
And how are you finding, because I had a non-binary friend on a couple of weeks ago and also a trans man, and they fucking love the testosterone. So how are you finding it?
I've done it twice for 2 little stints. It's fun. I kind of feel like it wasn't anything drastic for me. I wondered if I would feel a lot more energy or if I would feel different in my mental health. Not so much, but I like getting a cute little faggy mustache. And then I'm riding the wave where like I go up to the edge of getting some of the more permanent changes, and then I stop taking it for a while, and then I go back up to there. So I'm kind of dabbling.
Yeah, my friend does not want facial hair. And one thing that I found interesting, they were talking about when they orgasm, it was when they were more female presenting, that when they had an orgasm, it was like an orchestra, like something over here, something over here, something over there. And then when they were orgasming with testosterone, it was just like a one sustained note on a horn instrument. So I found that interesting.
It is. I mean, honestly, that it changes it a lot. I find orgasming on testosterone is way more intense. Like I'll make like involuntary, like a big involuntary sound, which I was like, oh, I do that?
I guess I have to monitor. I don't know that I could, that I've noticed that.
I think it maybe is only at a certain level, because also low dose, in order to go on testosterone, I had my levels checked, and I was not the same as you, Ingrid. I was not like
super low. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in a regular range for my assigned sex. And so when I take it is interesting. The orgasm is a lot more intense, but yes, it's like a laser focused, like,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Right. Okay. And it's interesting because I've obviously with menopause often women take testosterone when they go through, because that's a common, like I've had a couple of people that are taking it with the cream and felt that it really helped with their mental acumen and concentration and libido and stuff like that. Absolutely. So do you think you're going to be like a dude? This is stereotypical dude that I just see sniffing around for sex constantly, regardless of the consequences.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is I'm just like a curmudgeon of a person. And so I'm absolutely like would be down to fuck, but I'm also very picky and grumpy, and I go to bed early. So I'll kind of like crouch around in a grocery store hoping that somebody hot makes eyes at me, and then when they don't, I just cross my arms and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll just be cuddling my stuffed shark again. And so yeah. But what I have is, I mean, it's this is the other thing I wanted to say too, is since having had that surgery, I was able to start working as a GTA, which is a gynecological teaching associate, which means I get speculum exams for money. So I could never say this. I would get fired if I said this, but basically I'm like a medical grade sex worker without the sex, because it's not sexy at all. It's not sexy at all. It's purely educational, but it's kind of, I feel like that is my like success story is, before having had that surgery, having a speculum exam, a pelvic exam was excruciating. And now I teach people who have never held a speculum how to stick it in me.
Wow. I've done medical tests like that, but they did it on a plastic pelvis next to me and talked to me like I was said pelvis and talked me through results of an abnormal smear. So when I eventually got an abnormal smear, I was practically dictating back to the doctor what it meant, because I'd had so many doctors tell me. Yeah. And he was like, well, this is strange.
Yeah.
So what about children? Like, what's this? Like, do you want?
Oh, hell no. No. I never have and never will. If anything, it's like a phobia. Like I have literal nightmares about being pregnant.
Yep. I have nightmares about that.
That's so funny that all three of us are like that.
Oh God, no.
But I can say that the person that I knew who was a patient of Dr. Goldstein's that did help me, pitch me to go to him, did have a child during the period of 10 years that she was seeing him. And she has the same version of vestibulodynia as me. It was hormonally mediated. They say that having a child can cause it. It can also cure it. For some women, like having a child cures the condition. Same with menopause. Menopause can cause it, and menopause can sometimes cure it. So she was hoping that having a kid would cure it, and it didn't. But testosterone helped significantly.
That's a really big investment to try and cure your vestibule, isn't it? Spitting out a baby. Yeah.
It's always, I think it's a concern for many people who do want children and have the condition, because they're like, can you even withstand the doctor's visit, like the pelvic exams you're going to have to have a child?
Yeah. Part of me is like, by the time of birth, it's going to be so brutal and uncomfortable anyways. What's a little extra nerve pain on top of that,
Yeah.
Wow. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want to sound too cavalier for people that it's all they've ever wanted. But I have been very fortunate, I think, especially because I was single for a long time. Like I met my husband when I was 35. And I was single for about the 10 years before that, basically. But the fact that I never wanted children meant that I didn't have that sort of biological tick-tocking desperation sort of thing. But I know for a friend of mine, she was 45, I think, maybe, when she had her first baby. And she said that the word mum was like the best word she'd ever heard.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just think, for people that manage that, and sending love out to people that can't, because I can't. I'm just lucky that I haven't had that desperate urge.
It's funny you say that, because that's how I always put it too. Like that's this, I always think like, wow, I feel very lucky that I don't have to wrestle with the decision, because I have a lot of friends that do like deeply want that, but also can't see how it would fit into their life, or don't have the partner, or can't afford it, or can't the pregnancy won't catch on. And the agony of that seems difficult. And I feel like I got lucky by it's an easy decision because, I don't want to, so I don't even have to figure out how the other stuff could work.
Especially with our nomad life, tripping around the world doing shows, like you see, we've got some friends who do that on the fringe, but I just think that looks exhausting. Trying to figure out your billet.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No. Yeah. So did it affect your working life at all, this condition?
My working life. Well, for me, absolutely, because now a big chunk of my working life is using my vagina to teach people how to give a pelvic exam. So it kind of opened up a new avenue for my working life. And I think that's a big reason why I do that work, is because, I have my own agenda, which is to make sure that every med student that I see leaves with the message that you should tell your patient that this is not supposed to be uncomfortable. It's not supposed to be painful. Because just like having sex for the first time, I just figured, people don't like pelvic exams because they hurt so bad that you almost cry, right? And no doctor ever told me, okay, this might be uncomfortable, but it shouldn't hurt. Let me know if it's hurting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just, even if it's just that message, I I want everybody to say that to their patients.
Yeah. And what about you, Ingrid?
Yeah, for me, it hasn't particularly affected my particular work life, but a lot of people will describe, like, especially if it's more generalized vulvodynia, not just the specific provoked vestibulodynia, like you can't sit for long periods. You can, like, so how does that, how can you work? Or you can't drive your car comfortably. So it can't, for some people, it is truly devastating. And it's like the support groups, the Facebook groups are kind of too difficult for me to be on sometimes, because it does.
Yeah, that's right. Because I joined one and you went, hello and welcome. And I was like,
welcome
look
to
at
the
that.
Nightmare.
Yeah. And I did. I had to leave it because I was like,
it's mostly suicide notes. Yeah. It's just because it's just people kind of like Amica experienced in that support group in person, just a lot of very repressed people who it's devastating to their relationship. And they just feel like, I only live for my kids. I only live for my husband. I wouldn't want to be around if other people weren't relying on me. I was anxious about ever talking about this publicly, but even in me and Amica's conversation, like a couple weeks ago, someone that was overhearing us said, "Oh, I think I might have this."
Yeah.
So many people will go. It devastates me to think so many people will never know that there's even anything wrong with them. And it was a very sweet moment between Amica and I in the summer of 2015 at the Winnipeg Fringe at 4 a.m. on the steps below.
At the dance party.
At the dance party. The legendary Winnipeg Fringe dance party. Yeah. That was it came up in my memories, I think, yesterday.
Yeah, that's where we figured it out.
Yeah, we were sitting in the stairwell and I was really suffering. I was in that bad relationship, and I just was expressing that, sex was difficult for me. And I said something to the effect of, I think I have a sexual disability. And Amica just grabbed my arm and was like,
yeah.
Okay, no, go ahead. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's called provoked vestibulodynia. And they're like, I've never met another human with this condition.
Oh my God, and look at all three of us.
I was so excited.
Yeah.
I was so excited because it was somebody I already knew and loved as my friend. And I was like, thank goodness, because I had only heard whispers of other people or maybe on the internet, but not a real person I knew.
Yeah. Wow. And yet this condition affects as many as 15% of people seeking gynecological care.
Yes. I talked to my doctor about this, and I was just saying, oh my God, just again, thinking about the woman through the centuries and because I had to pay, what did I pay to visit her? It was $375 maybe, or $475 New Zealand dollars, which is probably about $350. And I think I could have been referred in the public system, but it would have taken a lot longer. Mm-hmm. But, and all of my medications are free.
Wow.
Yeah. Fuck you.
You don't have to make that face. We're happy for you.
I've been told that the medications I have to take, I'll be on forever, and it's about $60 to $90 a month. So.
Oof, yeah.
For the rest of my life.
Your country is a very interesting place.
Yeah. It's just the rent of my body.
Oh.
Oh, fuck. Right. Yeah. Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
It is pretty intense right now in the States. And
yeah, it really is, isn't
I was doing this gynecological work while the SCOTUS news was coming out about Roe versus Wade being overturned. And that was a hard day for me.
Yeah.
I was crying between sessions, and it felt, even though usually I don't feel traumatized at all, I feel very good being, up on the table talking about how to do these exams because I'm in control. I've taken over the narrative. I feel like I'm helping the future generation, but to be receiving those exams on that day was that was a bit much for me.
Yeah. And but Oregon should be okay. I mean, obviously it's not about just you.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, we're all fucking outraged, but Oregon. Oregon and California should be okay.
Yeah, and I don't see myself personally needing I have an IUD, so
same,
and no sex for many years. So
yeah, right. Yeah, but it's you just think about, people talk about abortions or the children that could have been saved, but my mum had an illegal abortion in Sydney in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so without that, she just said I could talk about it. She said didn't want me to before, but then she said I could.
Yeah.
So without that, I might not exist.
Yeah,
so that's
probably.
the other side of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
very common.
Yeah. Anyway, so kia kaha, which means be strong in Te Reo Māori, through all of that.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Anyway, that was a downer.
Oh, this whole thing is a waking nightmare.
Oh, wait, didn't you want us to say some fun facts or?
Yes, I was just about to get there, but I was going to ask you a question first. Yeah. Both of you, have you thought about doing a show about this?
Oh, Amica's all the time trying to convince me.
I've been pushing it.
Yeah.
But I understand. Yeah. I totally understand.
Well, what I said to Amica is just, as someone who does currently a show that talks a lot about trauma, what ends up happening is in the wake of after the show, you'll get a lot of people that feel seen for the first time and they want to talk to you about their experience. And of course, I want to be there for that and provide that for them. But it is it's a lot. It's a huge emotional labor, and that's going to happen. 15% of people seeking gynecological care have this.
Yeah, and I remember after seeing Eleanor's story, I was like, that is unflinching. That is definitely unflinching with the stories of rape and all that sort of stuff in war. So, yeah, I can see that would take. And I just have a small moment in Olive Copperbottom, which is my Dickens show, saying, the prostitute, Fanny Purchase, says, one day women will have control of their own bodies. And I hope to God it's soon. But you just go, and that was set in 1863, and you're like.
Fuck. Will we? Maybe for a few years here and there in a few certain categories, but.
Yeah.
So yes, let's hear your fun facts after all this fun chat that we've had.
Yeah. My deepest passion is weird animal sex and weird animal genitalia. So I was.
Oh my God, I had cockroach sex last week.
So you had cockroach sex last week?
No, I didn't have cockroach
I was like, wow.
But we talked about, that's not my kink. But anyway, yes.
Well, okay. So, the downer one that probably everybody already knows about is the subsect of hyenas where they have ginormous clitorises. So there's a kind of hyena where it's a matriarchy, but it's like this weird machismo matriarchy where the female hyenas are really aggressive and dominant, and they have these pseudo penises it's like an 8-inch clitoris that they pee out of, and the vagina itself is like almost evolved out, and they just have this, like, they call it a scrotal pad. There's not testes in it, but basically they're very intersex. There's not like a classic female presentation of the genitalia. But the bummer is that they give birth out of their clitoris, which usually is so painful and messy and uncomfortable that a lot of them die. So that's a real bummer.
What?
Wow.
Thanks for that.
That was great.
But possums have, male possums have a bifurcated penis. And I'm talking about the possums we have, the North American possums. I don't know about your kind.
Are they opossums or possums?
They are opossums, but you don't pronounce the O. Yeah.
Oh. And
I learned a lot about possums recently. Yeah. And also I learned that they were the first ones. They went down through South America and came across from there and started the whole marsupial trend. So they're the OG marsupials.
Wow.
But
the OG marsupial, right? What do they do?
So because the males have bifurcated penises, the females have 2 vaginas. Well, technically 3 vaginas, but one of them disappears and is only used for birth. It's a crazy system. But they have 2 vaginal canals, 2 uteruses, and 2 sets of ovaries. So it's nonsense.
Do they always have twins, or like, do they just choose which path to be inseminated through?
I mean, I haven't seen possum sex live and up close, but I imagine that the bifurcated penis just goes into the bifurcated vaginas
of course.
And kind of co-jizzes onto either side. And then the wildest part is they have this 3rd vaginal canal that is just for birth, where like the 2 uteruses kind of like merge into this one vagina that's only for birth, not for sex. And that's where all the little possums pile out of, and then it disappears again. Yeah, it's very complicated, but I found it fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Have you seen an echidna penis?
No, but I will be Google searching that later.
Look that shit up. Yeah, like it's like a little hand. It's very interesting. See, I can see this show is coming together, man. I can see you interspersing your stories with weird animal sex shit. I'm not quite sure about the market. Let's figure that out. We'll figure out the name. Oh, we can brainstorm that later. Yeah. I'm always about having a catchy name. But thank you for those fascinating facts. And Ingrid, over to you.
I don't think I want to go after that. I think I might just want to hear more from Amica.
Whatever you had prepared will be marvelous.
I did not prepare anything. I was hoping something would come to me.
That's all good. Well, there was 2 fun facts from Amica, so
give one for me.
We'll just say one of them was yours. Okay, good. Right. Is there anything else you wanted to say at all in this epic podcast that I shall edit further from the 1.5 hours that we have been doing?
Well, I think the big thing I want to say is before going to Dr. Goldstein, one of the most helpful treatments I received was physical therapy. Up until that point, physical therapy had been the most helpful to me. And that would probably be my number one recommendation to anyone that's having pelvic floor pain, because they told me, they're like, it's so strange how, when you get in a car accident, to go to physical therapy because you've experienced trauma to your body. But after like a sexual assault, why would you not do the same thing? So if you're having pain due to other causes, that could be something that could really be helped and addressed by physical therapy. And honestly, the physical therapist I went to was at a clinic where pretty much all the other PTs also experience vestibulodynia, and they specialize in pelvic floor therapy. And also, I want to say that a lot of these places, Dr. Goldstein included, and Sarton Physical Therapy where I went, they take international they take clients from around the country, and they can do an online consultation with you and help you find care providers near you that know about this. So if you're feeling lost and you feel like you're in North Carolina and you don't feel like there's anyone around, you can get care that way. And also check the National Vulvodynia Association website. They have a lot of fantastic resources. And also, if you have it, go participate in studies. There's a summit this summer with Dr. Andrew Goldstein and a few others, and they are kind of trying to create a focused effort to create more studies and actually test the current medications that are being prescribed, because again, there's not a lot of empirical evidence that the current stuff being prescribed even works. So if you want to get paid to participate in those studies, there might be ones happening near you. So I really encourage you to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about this happening in New Zealand. Most of my listeners are in New Zealand when I look at my demographic. So that would be the...
But you can contact them.
That's the thing about the States. And they do international things. But this is the thing, that the States is such an enigma in a way, that it has so much progressive thought, so much incredible medical stuff, so many fabulous performers. A lot of all my friends from there are obviously great. And then you have this whole other Jekyll and Hyde situation, it's like, so there's so much stuff coming out of it that's great for everyone, but then no one can afford it. Anyway, what about you?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Ingrid, because I also wanted to say that my experience going to see Dr. LeClaire, they have since changed the format of that clinic, and now they take all insurances and out-of-pockets open to anybody. And I know several people that have traveled to see her there as well. So that's Oregon Health and Sciences University, the vulvar pain clinic. I would highly recommend that. Also, there's a very amazing group that puts out a podcast and also does some zines and some online things called Tight-Lipped. I did a little interview with them, Tight-Lipped podcast. And they talk a lot about all sorts of different, usually secret pelvic pain conditions. And it's like a really great resource. So I would look into that as well, or give the podcast a listen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, you two. And it's lovely to see your face. It's a little touch of friend.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, no worries.
This is fab.
Good. I'm glad. And hopefully we'll get the message out there to lots of people. Okay, so great. Well, thank you very much. And I'll see you somewhere in the world sometime.
You're there.
Yeah, see you in the world.
Bye. Okay, bye. Woo. So that was the fantastically honest, vulnerable, brave, superstar-y and hilarious Ingrid Garner and Amica Hunter talking about their provoked vestibulodynia. I am beyond grateful that they were so open, as it were, about such a painful part of their lives, and that they are as passionate as I am about making women and trans people aware of just what their pain might be and how they might cure it, and knowing that it is not in their heads, without resorting to burning off the nerve endings with capsicum extract, for fuck's sake. Oh, and I want to acknowledge, of course, that I realise not all medications are free in New Zealand for various issues around vulvas, menopause, etc. So I just want to say I'm lucky enough to get what I've been prescribed for free, but I realise it's still prohibitive in New Zealand, even though it's not the same as the States. I have included links to their websites and their great shows, as well as for Tight-Lipped podcast and New Zealand and US Vulvodynia websites in the show notes. So thanks, as always, for listening to that epic tale. I was just like, oof, It's just such important information. Next week, it's New Zealand's leading lady with a penchant for getting her kit off, Yvette Parsons, as seen in Nude Tuesday. And coming up, I also have the listener cover girl, Kate Billing, on the menopause issue, and one of New Zealand's best menopause specialists, Dr. Anna Fenton. Oh, also, if you are in Nelson, come and see me interview Nikki Pellegrino and Nikki Bazant together for a special Showy Ovaries Live at the Nelson Festival. And thanks to Kerry Sunderland for booking me in for that. Ticket link in the show notes. Also, so do like Hot Pink Penny Ashton's Facebook page to know all about the shows I have coming up. Feel free to chip into my Patreon to help get the word out further. And welcome to Jenny Agnew and Renee Liang as my new supporters. Hello. Rate me 5 stars wherever you listen to my showy bits. And in the immortal words of Pinky Agnew in episode 1, all those months ago, stay juicy, everybody. Ka kite anō. I've been Penny Ashton for Showy Ovaries, VNN Special.